So I actually have two initiatives. But anyway, just briefly, Connections Resource Center is a community organization that promotes the health, well-being, and vitality of the English-speaking population in the Kueber region. So next, and Heritage College.
Well, basically, Heritage College is the English-speaking college west of Montreal in Quebec. There's no other. And so we serve quite a large sector, large geography, and we do have programs that kind of link up nicely with Connections. We've had in the past various initiatives that were basically bringing in the nursing program or the early childhood care. And so this is where we already had a kind of foundation in our past history. So then when we'll get to one of the projects today that will illustrate how quick, and we'll discuss how we got it off the ground rather rapidly, got really good outcomes from it, and how I'll talk to the issue of how administrations ultimately in colleges, or how colleges can help out as educational bodies to also get the word out for local community partners.
So I didn't want to give too many stats, but basically we have 4 rural MRCs and the city of Gatineau, so it's a huge territory. We represent 18.7% of the population overall, but that can depend on where you live. So if you live in the Pontiac, it's 56% are Anglophone. If you live in Gatineau, it's 17%. So it's very different from wherever you live. And also, English-speaking children 0 to 5 represent 7%, and we're one of the only regions that has seen a growth in the 0 to 5 population. One of our initiatives, the very first one, which is basically a kit that we sent home for kindergarten and pre-kindergarten families, was basically back in 2012 when the first ECDEM, the Enquête Québécoise des enfants à la maternelle, came out, and where our region was clearly not doing very well. And when you broke it down by language, Anglophone children were even more vulnerable than Francophone children. So that was a really major concern, and again, with our partners, we were looking about what certain actions could be. And so a lot of organizations were developing these types of kits to send home. So we partnered with the school board, so they disseminate these to parents who are registering their children for kindergarten, so it goes out through them, as well as our intersectoral partners, because we work with many different partners, or other community organizations who are also serving Anglophones, as well as social services. So we have different strategies in terms of disseminating it, and we have a number of partners who contribute to this package. For instance, Heritage College, their students from the early childhood care program develop the tip sheets, and that's one of their work activities. So, what kinds of tips can they come up with for parents? And so we include that in our kit as well. So that was really our kind of foray into getting into the 0 to 5. And at that time, there was also what you call a prise de conscience when we were sitting at this regional forum where all the partners were there. And it was actually a Francophone who got up after looking at the stats for Anglophones and said, oh my God, this is really, terrible. So there has been more of definitely awareness. And so following that now, and this is why the beauty of what, CASA did, what CHSSN have done, makes our life a lot easier, because we're not out here to reinvent the wheel. We're going to take their framework. We're actually now getting money from the system to do our 0 to 5 study. So it serves us as a community. It is going to serve the CIS as well in terms of their planning for services for families. And it's also going to help other organizations who are doing it, who are also working with 0 to 5. So, this is definitely going to make our life a lot easier to begin our study. So that's basically it for the kid, and these are just some examples of the different partners that we've been involved with. And so now our second initiative was a play group. So many years ago, a social worker from the Salle Jeunesse had called and asked if there was a play group for Anglophones in Hull, and it was like totally non-existent. So basically families had to go to Elmer because it's more Anglophone, but the play groups there aren't advertised, so unless you know somebody, you don't really know where to get it. Or they go to, to Ottawa. So I went no, and then our office was initially at Pierre Elliott Trudeau School, and we had a CLC with us, so we decided, and we had a parent volunteer who said, I'll start it. So that's how we got started. And that's actually at the CLC room at Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Well, it's now something else because it's become very, become a classroom. And so we also collaborated with the Military Resource Family Center in Ottawa, who have a clientele as well in Gatineau. So they were providing a facilitator, and so we collaborated on that for about a year or two. And really our idea was just to be able to bring English-speaking young parents together, to give them a forum where they could actually meet, speak English, and get to know each other and build a social support network. So, so again, you see that happening next. And so that's when we were in the cafeteria. And Big Phil was a psychoeducateur who was hired through our intersectoral table, and he would go into Pierre Elliott Trudeau School to do work with the kids, but he'd also come into our play group and work with the parents as well. And we had, many different partners now. So we can have, like, here we have our, speech therapist from the CIS who comes in and talks about language development. So our approach is really one of the social is primary, and we kind of very subtly integrate the health promotion and prevention aspect of it. And and that's in our office, which was the last place. So we made many different moves because the school was getting really full. And so we basically had nowhere to go, and because we had our relationship with Heritage College, both through this initiative as well as with the nursing program for bursaries, they became aware of our issue and said, well, let's work together and offer it at Heritage College. So so basically, I guess it was really just to get, what's happened is that we started with maybe 2 parents, 3 parents coming, and everybody was getting really discouraged. Over time, it started to grow. There were more parents that were coming. Since we've been at Heritage College, it's just like, I think, exploded. It brought it to another level. Being able to work with the ECCE department and with the students, because I'll let Ryan talk about that part of it, it's really brought it to another level. And I thought maybe, maybe parents aren't really going to want to go to Heritage College, because it's always location, right? But not an issue. And actually, just Friday I got an email from a parent again in Hull who was saying, I'd like to go to your play group. My French is really bad, so I'm really looking for somewhere to go. So we've really seen that there's a need for it. And for us in Hull, where there really aren't that many Anglophones, we're really actually being able now to identify English-speaking young families, which is really, really key. So I'll let Roya talk about their experience.
Yep. So essentially in spring of 2017, end of the semester, I get wind of the fact that basically Connections has been touching base with one of our teachers in ECCE and wondering what can we do about space. And so the first meeting, I call everybody in, basically we have a little chat to find out what their needs are. And we established that obviously you're looking for space because you're going to be booted out essentially, But in the process of discussing exactly what the playgroup was, which is also in the process, the idea is really to enrich the lives of the parents to better interact with their children. I saw the other side of the coin, and ultimately as an academic dean, I saw the opportunity for our students who are actually being the educators to children. They're the other side of the coin. And how could they benefit from a real life experience happening within the halls of our school? And within the halls of our college, we have to consider that we always try to bring in that real life experience in various ways, but there is an element of actually having the little children in our halls. And I'll get to that in the sense of how the ramifications are, in the sense of what it brought to the college as a whole, not just the program. Colleges have, at first and foremost, obviously the role and the mandate to educate and to train people for their future jobs. But in a sense, they often play in regional areas. They play a very strategic role. They're often a very key employer also in the region. But more importantly, we have possibility with many of the young people going through our college halls and getting, diplomas and attestations of their training to go out back into the society. And the idea is to keep them in the regions also. So we're very much aware of that. And so our outreach was not just to reach out to the community, but to have the community within our walls with this opportunity. And so I counter-proposed the aspect of them just wanting a classroom. I said, what if we can have our students at least observe the children at different times? They do observation, especially in the first year. And even if they want to, at later years, in the second or third year of their training, actually maybe prepare an activity and go in there and do it. But obviously, at the time that is appropriate to the playgroup. We kept the autonomy of the playgroup to let us know when we could step in and not, or do certain things. And so this kind of obviously was very well received. So the aspect there was the challenge now finding the teacher that from the get-go was eager to start something, to now address how she teaches the courses. When is she teaching the courses? When does it comply? And all those kind of logistics come into play. And I said, have your conversation. Have your direct conversation between the educator, the teacher in the classroom, and the person from Connections that's going to lead this playgroup, is going to work with it. Have them identify where all of these challenges are going to be. What do you need from us? More importantly, we said, let's start up, and that's where I got in touch with Danielle Lanny as well. Let's write this down as a partnership. And that gave access to the building basically free of charge. It's an exchange of goods. It's an exchange of services. It's a community partnership. It's a shared responsibility to make sure that this project's going to go off the ground and actually help out. Okay? So the eager aspect of looking at where the money is wasn't the issue. The issue is how can we best serve our community? There are parents out there who need help with their children. And in the process, we also ultimately have the process of having our students realize the needs that are existent just down the hallway, outside those doors and into the streets a few blocks away. And in the process of this fuller collaboration, it kind of raised the awareness also from our teacher standpoint of not just, because we're Anglophone and there is a big Anglophone community across the river in Ottawa, but there's an Anglophone community in Gatineau or in the Pontiac or in the Outaouais that needs to be addressed as well. And so the aspect is, as an administrator, is not to look at just the mechanics of it all, but in the process also look at where the gains are and to be a bit creative in how you're going to address an issue, where a request for a room becomes ultimately the initiative of basically shared responsibilities across the way. And so also for them, wherever they were thinking of spending funds on rental, they can probably spend it on people. And have somebody who's going to be the animator of that group or any other, tools or otherwise that they need. That openness to modifying your practices is key, in a sense. You have to be able to be extremely flexible and ongoing flexibility. Having the two key individuals talking to each other was the first thing. Letting them know that I'm their contact person, for instance, once they have questions. And once they have their questions, then they can go back ultimately to understand and then bring in the other services. So you got to simplify the process, in fact, not complexify it. Clearly identify the steps for everyone so nobody's going in faster than their expectations. So there's a proposal stage. We're still kind of just chewing the fat on this idea. You know, we'll see if it can take off. Then there's an actual development and implementation where you're going to bring in ultimately all the other people. We have to make sure that they had the parents coming in, where would they be signing in? Because we have policies about signing into the college, being access to the building, for instance. We tried to simplify it, thinking, okay, the parents going to come in probably with all their kid and caboodle and all their other kids and carrying things, and the little one. Okay, or the little ones actually coming in. And it's winter, and there are boots, and there's this, you know, all the little things that you might not think of as an administrator because you're not on the ground. And moving towards that, the development of how to go forward with it, trying to simplify everybody's help, and then to tell them it's a go once it's ready to go. Okay? I think if you,
We have some.
yeah, you got some pictures of,
So this is our new room.
yeah. And so they were thinking of just having access to ultimately a classroom. We gave them the ECC lab, which is made special with even that soft flooring for the kids to kind of play around with and everything else. And there was an awareness of them storing their equipment at the same time as the others. With that development, at the end of the year, they came back and they said, you know what we would really like, can we rearrange some of the walls and have an observation room? So change it, put a glass wall, seen only one way, etc. To less disturb the play group, but at the same time do what they need to do. And so it was a success. They came back, you know, with the idea, let's renew this, let's move this forward, let's advance this kind of process. And in the added to that was, hey, what about if we could add at least once a month baby chat, which is for the infants, basically a year and younger, and have parents come in and talk to each other. And that was an immediate, yeah, sure, no problem, and we'll proceed the same way, and we have a mechanism that works very well. The idea is, as we developed, if there's any aspect, at first we thought of day passes for parking because they're only coming once a week, and then we said, okay, you know what, when parents seem to identify that they're coming back, let's just give them a seasonal pass kind of thing, you know, for the parking. So they don't have to show up. They can just park, come in, go to the room, do what they have to do. The students gained immediately, obviously, the experience. Furthermore, they could go from their classroom, from theory, go and observe, come back and debrief immediately. There's no delay in the debriefing, for instance. It's not a week later or a few days later. They saw how enriching that kind of debriefing was. The teachers adapted their pedagogy, it revived them, it motivated them to move forward and change things. The curriculum gains are immense, and we're only going to really truly find out probably the fallout of this in a couple of years when they're looking at all the other courses they're doing as well. And the fact is it came from a collective decision in the beginning and continues to be a collective responsibility. I would say to anybody out there who's trying to do this with a thing, the idea is that shared responsibility is very key. That creativity, the solution seeking along the way, the seeking to ongoing improvement, changing things if you need to, open communication, constant emails with everybody involved in it. Even if it's the building administrator who's going to be looking after the parking passes with the front office, etc. You know, everybody's in the loop, nobody's not in the dark, you know. And a desire for ultimately having this for the local community. Parents now know we also exist, you know. We're stepping, you know, into a foray where, yeah, from the 0 to 5, they're noticing where we are. And they may be looking at the boards and realizing, you know what, they're offering something for the community in the evening, extra, you know, courses that they might want to take. They might want to self-improve themselves. They're in the hallways. They get to know what we also do. So they share that life. But I can tell you that the first benefit that we immediately saw was the first day it started, and having those little kids come in, and as they're trying to find their way to the room with their parents, it was the smile on the faces of everybody who crossed them. And all of a sudden what we created was an intergenerational space, ultimately. And we're exploring how we could bring in the other generations in the process as well.
So, I mean, the partnership is, I mean, it's amazing, and what's developed in a really short period of time.
Yeah.
And for them, for us, what I've learned as a minority community, because often when you want to start other institutions want to start programs. It's, you need a critical mass, and then you're trying to fit into this box, but you can't. So for us, we have the ability to start really small. If we're only 2 or 3, we're going to go with that. So these are lessons that we've learned is, start small, build it slowly. It engages the partners, evaluate, listen, and that's one of the things that we were always wanting to do, is to hear what people wanted to do so you can give it to them. Communicate, make it fun. That, I would say, is number one, is you have to make it fun in order for them to want to be there. So these are the lessons we've learned, and why we've been able to engage and to have really solid partnerships.
So welcome everybody. You are in Mohawk territory as we speak. I'm Natalie Golba from Mohawk territory of Kahnawake, and my colleague Melissa Lasante. We're going to talk to you a little bit about which is the place of learning of precious families. It is considered a CPE, Centre de Petite Enfance, except that we have 12 funding sources because we seek different funding sources. I'm continuously fundraising because we need to provide the quality of service that we give to our children 0 to 5 and their families. We don't just service the child, we service the entire family and the extended family. So back in 1983, there were 2 moms that met at the local hospital because their children had severe disabilities. And they decided, as they sat around the kitchen table, that they didn't want their children to be serviced outside of the community. A, because of the language, and B, because of the culture, and because they wanted to be close to home and to be in their own environment. So they connected with 5 other mothers. So these are the faces of the 7 original children of Step by Step. So first and foremost, the vision was always that all children be accepted at all times, in all places, by everyone. So that is what we strive for. So with these 12 funding sources, we also connect with the FNQL-HSSC, which is the First Nations, Quebec and Labrador's Health and Social Services Commission, which helped us to get a lot of the English materials because, as you know, with the Minister of Families, it's next to nil. So in order for us to better serve our population, we need to connect with other First Nation communities and other English-speaking communities. So what's very precious to us is that we have 3 installations right now. We're working on a 4th and 5th. We have 2 80s and a 20. Our 20 right now is Mohawk immersion. So they're first learning their mother tongue is Ganyageha, which is Mohawk. And then with our other 2 of 80, and we're looking at a 37 and possibly another 48 installation. We have just under 500 0 to 5-year-olds in Kahnawake. So it's very precious in that it's our people, our community, our culture and language, and that's what determines their identity. When you ask a little one at 4 years old, who are you, what is your identity? Some populations will say, well, I'm a little boy and I'm 4 years old. Well, they will say, I'm Ganyageha and my name's Rurunyadeka. And I come from Kahnawake, and these are my roots, and this is who I am. So by forming that, we feel that we're giving them a good start, a head start in becoming who they are as young Ngwehumwe people or First Nations people.
Yeah, so at Step by Step, we are an inclusive center. We focus on early intervention, and we're in an environment where everybody belongs. So we're always looking towards the parents and the families to gain an understanding of what their perspectives are, because we really value what families have to say in terms of teaching their child. And so we really view everything we do as a collaboration between ourselves and the parents and the families of the community.
And at Step by Step, we don't have an expulsion policy. So the minister will write to us and say, we need all of your policies, we need all of your regulations, all of your... We said, we don't have an expulsion policy because everybody belongs. So if you're biting, if you're not getting along, if you're, we find ways to adapt. we make sure Melissa, who's in charge of pedagogy and in charge of resource, will work with the specialists to ensure that we help this family in finding their way through the system and there's no expulsion. The other thing we don't have is we don't have a bus, and we will never have a bus. We want to see the parents, we want to see the grandparents, we want to see the aunts and uncles. So we want you to come through our doors every single day and be a part of our
programming
Of
and
our
our environment.
Yeah. So the way we start off our day, every single day, is with the Ohanda Garibadekwa. And what that is, it's our Thanksgiving address. It's how we start everything off. So, you know, we will start off with the you know, we will talk to them about, first and foremost, these are the words that come before all else. And we'd like to thank Mother Earth for everything that she has provided for us. We are thankful for the water that we drink. We are thankful for the food that we eat. We are thankful for the animals that feed us. We are thankful for the moon, the stars, and everything that they provide us. So we make sure that the children learn that, and so it teaches them a lot of respect. It teaches them what they need to do on a daily basis, and we don't do it by rote. So they will go out into the community and they'll go for a walk and they'll go, oh, look at the beautiful trees. The trees are what gives us, you know, air and what helps provide, you know, everything for our community. So it's quite precious in what we do.
It's helping the children form the understanding that everything is interrelated. You know, so in order for children to grow up strong and healthy, they need to be connected to the earth. So they need to be thankful for the trees, because the trees give us foods that we eat, such as apples and pears and whatnot. So we look at all of the things that are provided for us by Mother Earth, and we teach the children that we need to be thankful for those things. In following our curriculum, we've adopted many different approaches. For instance, we take many principles are drawn from the Reggio Emilia curriculum, as well as some elements of high scope, Head Start. And we're currently in the process of creating our own curriculum, which is very unique and very, I guess it speaks to the children and the families that we service, and that it takes into consideration all of these things that we're talking about when we're speaking of the Ohanda Garibadekwa. So we're drawing from many elements to create something that is unique in our own.
So culture and language is the foundation of everything that we do. It's not a subject. It's in every single thing every day that we do. So for instance, in March, we do the tapping of the trees for the maple. The children go out there. They actually get to be a part of the process. They even get to see the sap boiling, and they get to see what the results are afterwards. We go into the Ganusesne, or the longhouse, and the children will do the ceremonial dances, and they will learn. Right now we're going into midwinter, so we just finished harvest, so we'll go into midwinter, they'll do the stirring of the ashes, so it's the renewal, and they get taught, you know, the great feather dance, and they get taught all of these rituals that we do. So you'll see one of them doing the stirring of the ashes. So it's basically saying the year has come to a close, and in Ganyageha, or in Mohawk, we will say the words thanking the Creator for allowing us one more year on Mother Earth and gaining everything that she has provided to us, because we don't know if that will come again, and we ask for it to come again. So that's the process we do there.
Yeah, so a basic philosophy of the Step-by-Step Child and Family Center is that every child has the right to be a part of the mainstream. So we are an inclusive center, and we respect all children equally. So regardless of any behavioral issues that they may have or any learning needs that they may have, we go above and beyond to be able to reach those children and those families and to support them in their journey. So Natalie and I were just having coffee together this morning, and one of the things that we were talking about is the difference between integration and inclusion. So we really believe that inclusion is the way to go. And the difference between those two things is that it would be very easily to integrate any child into our programming, but what we do is we go above and beyond, because we want the child to feel included So how does that happen? It's by making changes to our programming that will best service the child. Anything else on that? So we're always striving to provide a culturally relevant curriculum. As I was mentioning earlier, we're currently in the process of revising a curriculum and making something more formal. As I said, we take into consideration many well-known philosophies with regards to early childhood education, such as the Reggio Emilia principles, Head Start, High Scope. But really what we want most above everything is to allow children the experiences of doing things. It's a really hands-on type of learning approach, and we really want children to be actively involved in pursuing their own knowledge. I should mention as well is that a lot of our curriculum is very much focused on the social emotional development and well-being of the child. So even though math and language are very important, we really focus on having the child develop a strong understanding of who they are, so that as they move on in life and as they enter into the kindergarten and grade 1 elementary school system, that they're able to receive the learning in a way that's meaningful to them, because they're now able to sit quietly and be attentive to whatever it is that the teacher is teaching them about.
So we're using a holistic framework. Some people spell it with the H, some people spell it with the W, and the W is because it's the whole person. So holistically, we use the approach to support our programs and services, and it's in the 4 quadrants of the emotional, spiritual, cultural, and intellectual. And Indigenous people of Canada, or First Nations people, Métis, Inuit, and Innu, and all of the different nations, we have, there's a lot of multi-generational trauma that has happened. There's a lot of things that we have to heal from, and in order to move forward in that, we need to accept and understand it, and together provide an environment that feels safe and that feels, you can't have, for instance, there's parents who don't know how to parent. And so the elders have told us, don't take that responsibility away from them, because they went away to residential school till they were 18 years old and they didn't know how to parent. And they gave that on to it's time for us to break that cycle. It's time for us to, show them and teach them and be with them and support them in their learning so that their children can strive. And at the same time, that we need to spread the message, and we need to go out there and remind people. So, we have had the opportunity most recently to speak with the faculty of Concordia University to talk about what they're doing in the indigenizing and of their curriculum, and to say what it is that we need for our students when we get, when we talk about a culture shock. Well, you might view that a little bit differently than we will, because first and foremost, we come from a very supported, embraced, helped community where, yes, we're, some people will say we're disadvantaged, but we're advantaged in a lot of ways. And then when we do leave our community, it's very, very difficult to understand how it works on the outside. So having all of that and having that base, like Melissa said, once you can socially, emotionally regulate and be able to, state what you need and be able to work or be in an environment, it makes that much easier when you step outside your comfort zone, if you wish.
And so we value the expertise that parents have regarding their children. We never try to impose on families what we feel is best for their children, because we understand that the parent is first and foremost the primary teacher of their child. So we always seek to build relationships with the parents and families that come into our center, and we see it as a collaboration. We have an image of the child that is based on the child being confident, able to make choices, interested, capable, And we see every child as being responsible for making their own choices with regards to what it is that they want to learn and what it is that they want to know about. And so we are very intentional in making curricular choices that not only take into consideration the child's culture and which is the foundation of everything we do, but that we consider every child to be very powerful and very knowledgeable. And so we really deliver a curriculum that is based on what the child is telling us they need. We work very hard to develop tools of the trade that are specific for Indigenous peoples. So for instance, when families come into the center, they fill out a questionnaire, which is an ages and stages questionnaire. Yet we are working to collaborate to ensure that the questionnaire that families are filling out is reflective of their knowledge and their culture, so that children are supported in the activities that they do within the center.
What's very different about Step by Step is that I think we have 53 employees. We have on-site psychologists 2 days a week. We have an on-site speech therapist 2 days a week, and we have 3 days a week a resource consultant that comes into right on-site. So when you're doing a particular therapy, if you wish, with the child, what's happening is that they're doing transfer of training right onto our educators. They're teaching them, and they're doing the family service plan. We also have a child and family support worker. We have 2 resource teachers. And an inclusion support worker. And an inclusion support worker. So what you have in the classroom is not anywhere near what the minister would allow you for ratios, where they do 1 to 5, 1 to 8, 1 to 10. It far surpasses that. So we sometimes work with 1 to 5. We have, I believe this year, 7 children with autism. We have 1 with Down syndrome. We have global developmental delay. We have apraxia. We have, and like I said, we do not say, oh my goodness, we can't service this child. We say, how are we going to service this child? What are we going to do differently? How are we going to adapt? And that's what Melissa spends, when she does her intake through, DYP or through wherever. We're always looking at the needs, not only of the child, but of the family. In our center, we have a calming room where when the child is just really struggling, where we go into that room with that child, we don't exclude them, but when they're going to be harming themselves, the educator or others around them, we will bring them in there and we will read them a social story, or we will do what we need to so that we can easily bring them back into where they need to be at that time. So Step by Step is like no other place. It's not just a CPE, it's a child and family center. We're very proud, very privileged, and very honored to have presented to you today. And if at any point you're in our vicinity, please call us up. We'd be more than welcome to have you amongst us. Thank you very much for your time.
Those are all really interesting to see sort of the state of things in 3 different places, but some of the similar concerns and different approaches to solving problems and to going forward. Lots of family, even noticed that seems to be a key thing, the connection, not just working with the children, but also with the. There's some questions.
I guess this is for Cathy. Talking about where you said 8 out of the 12 kids are not school ready in a lot of different ways. Do you find that the material you might provide for the parents, do the parents have the literacy level to read it, understand it, and integrate it into what they're doing? Is that often a problem?
Yes, it is a problem for sure. And it depends on the areas. Like I said, our MRCs are really different. A good example is the MRC in Avignon has 2 Indigenous communities. So that's a different set of conditions. The MRC in Côte-de-Gaspé is an MRC that's more bilingual, but the stats are totally different. So each individual school or group of parents are different conditions for sure, but level of literacy with adults is a major issue. Like Wiggle Rhyme and Storytime is a program that was designed that there's no books except for the end we read a story. But the Wiggle and the Rhyme is done specifically for parents who have low levels of literacy, so they don't feel excluded because he can't come to a play spot and not read. So it's done through nursery rhymes and different activities. But like this is such a new program, and we're still in the development stage. But it's very amazing to see the different partners around the table and how everybody's contributing to the greater action plan. So it's not just a CASA action plan, it's CASA County Vision, ESSB, Adult Ed, Family Ties, who we all contribute to different, to similar outcomes.
Can I just add to that? Because it kind of can relate to your question. One of our challenges is in, first of all, just identifying and reaching those vulnerable families. How do we do that? It's
Where do you find them?
where do you find them? Yeah, so it's trying to find these different ways.
I guess a grocery store.
We know
Well,
that.
it's just-
Walk
We
in
know
line,
they're
see
there.
them with the kid in the park, and you say, here.
But we have really small communities.
And we don't see.
Yeah, we
that's
do,
the-
like
Yeah.
we have small communities, so I remember when we started Wiggle Rhyme and Storytime, we personally knew how many parents there were, children 0 to 5, and we sent a personal invite by mail. Did a follow-up phone call. Because Facebook doesn't, you know,
Yeah.
so you can't assume you're reaching your clientele, so but it's a process, it's not always baby steps, I say. Get 4 today, get 5 tomorrow, and eventually success breeds success.
Yes, so thank you. Those are 3 very wonderful programs and a lot of points of commonality. And the question actually had to do with special needs, and I'm so glad you brought it up and talked about how you've brought the services to step by step, because when we were having the second conversation, I was wondering about the training programs in early childhood, knowing, a few of you quoted the ACDEM study and showing areas of vulnerability, so we know kids are coming into play settings or early childhood programs undiagnosed. And so how are you able to, or would you be able to replicate in any way, trying to bring those health professionals in to try and get some clarity for parents around diagnosing autism earlier or language disorders, or like, I know it's a struggle because of the lack of health and social services out in smaller communities, but I love what you've done. And if there's, I'm just wondering about, especially at the college level, because I don't know that program very well, but I wonder about how well prepared early childhood educators feel, similar to what teachers tell us, we're not trained to deal with the diversity we see. How well are we able to connect health and social services to those early educational pathways?
Yeah, I think the key aspect in any of these things is really understanding our role very well and being the training ground for these educators. Part of the curriculum covers the special needs, the autism spectrum, what to look for, how these are things done, and what they as educators will be looking at and confronting, as well as they're in field work pretty quickly. They're into observation from the first semester, they're into field work by the second or third semester, and then every year they get that kind of on-the-ground training from 1 day a week to 2 days a week in the second year to a full week. Then they have a full stage out in the 5th semester. So they're very much aware already of this kind of diverse clientele, working with parents, working with the center or wherever they're going to be working with, so the administrative style of things, being aware of what the obligations to the profession are vis-a-vis also local policies and practices and things like that. So they're already challenged with that really early on. And the element there is for the teachers to make sure that there's always that kind of debriefing and feedback loop in a sense of their learning. So they're scaffolding the learning, but also in a sense ensuring that the student is ready for the next step in their learning. So as students are becoming educators, early childhood educators, they can do that. So we're aware of that kind of side of it. As to any specific needs that could be brought to the parents, that would fall onto that kind of group where they invited various individuals to come in and talk about different issues with parents.
Yeah, that's why we try to get in the different professionals who come in. We also had an interesting project through one of our adaptations, which is federally funded through the Health Institution Project, where in one area they had developed for their early childhood screening at the CLSC they had this evaluation form that was called a JED. And so the CLSC and psychoeducatrice would train staff from the schools to do the evaluation. So that way the evaluation didn't have to happen at the CLSC. It was done right at the school. And we did a pilot with them, and it worked really well. It was in more rural areas. And so we had also developed some activities around that. Unfortunately, in the reform, it kind of got trashed with a whole bunch of other good things that were happening. We were hoping that it's going to come back, but it was a really good initiative to actually, give it back to the school, because that's where they're going to go. It helps to bring them into school. Sometimes it's, difficult. Parents are reticent. They didn't have a good experience themselves. How do you get them in? That's, one way of doing it, and of doing the early detection, because we don't have the services. And as an English minority, I can speak for my community. My God, years of waiting just for an evaluation. Let's not even talk about services. That's our reality.
You mentioned the participation before when you first started looking at it, was 0 to 20%. And then the participation when you went into this partnership arrangement exploded. So I was hoping you would share some best practices on how you got there. And I know call, the mail, the personal follow-up is obviously one of them, but in these rural contexts, those are the gems I'm hoping to take away with, because it's always those wonderful families, the ones who are really out there not connected, that we have trouble with. And have you figured it out? Do you have something to share?
But I think that the key partnership is with the schools and CLSAs. Like you're talking with health professionals and parents, the school board, the project I was referring to earlier, that's their entire program is bringing parents into the school and then bringing the health professionals in as well to build that bond. Because ultimately the school has the connection to the families. And so we should share, collaborate.
Yeah, we from the beginning looked at how we would promote this, and so the key element was also obviously the social media, the sharing on social media, but also anywhere we went, we indicated what we were doing. So even if I was in a discussion with other colleges or other venues, I would say, look, we're looking at this and we're doing that. So we're spreading the word in various ways. The other element is to facilitate the access as easy as possible. We're not questioning, can you pay for parking or anything else? We're not questioning what, come and do this, we'll have that, make it easy for them. Find a location where it's easiest for them to have access and to vacate also. They're already dealing with their children in the moment and learning a lot. So the last thing is you want to avoid all the complexities. And the element is, humans sometimes have a tendency to, like I said, to make things complex. So constantly one has to think, how am I going to simplify this? Actively think about simplifying the process. And it doesn't mean that we changed any of our rules or regulations about how to access the building or what to do or parking or anything. But we said, how can we do this in a certain way? And so we have this idea of a partnership, which is the way we operate with different organizations. There are individuals who rent space in our building. That's not a question. That's where they want to remain, and that's fine. But there's also the fact of, when we see such a great initiative for local people that can literally kind of come up from their apartment and go into our building, why not? And it's a way of really, like I said, also bringing the community within the walls. We have a tendency to sense also that we're broadcasting, but inviting people over is a nice thing to do as well.
Because one of the things, just to piggyback, I thought that was really interesting. You said we don't have buses. And so yes, that's amazing. And then my mind goes to but what about the people that don't have a car? Do you facilitate?
There are ways. If they're really stuck, we will find ways. And the way we bring them in is we offer food. We do a family breakfast every Wednesday of the last Wednesday of the month, and we bring in up to 200 people, sometimes more. Food will always bring them, or if we want to deal with children, let's say they have a speech impediment or they have something and we want the parents to come, we will say, why don't you come to our drumming exercise that we're doing? Why don't you come, but so you do it in a non-threatening environment, and so they're there, and then you have a chance to do a one-on-one with the parent while the child, so it's intentional, and it's, done in a way that's very safe. and very respectful. Thank you, everyone.